Hello and welcome to Audiogyan. Today I am very excited to release our 50th episode, and also Audiogyan turns 1 today. Since its inception, I have interviewed 45 people and it's been a great learning experience, not only from the GAN sessions but also from the wonderful interactions I had with all the guests. In the past year, I was exposed to a whole lot of new philosophies and realized how deep and wide the canvas is for design and arts. In this anniversary episode, I have collected few of the questions and answers from various people that I have interviewed. These snippets will give a sneak peek into insights which guests have shared in the past year. But before I begin, I would like to give a heartfelt thanks to all the listeners and all the guests who have given their time for these GAN sessions, and few more people. Kamal Nayan, who implanted this idea of documenting Indian designers. Jaideep Gajera, who works in ClearTrip, for making my first cut of website, audiogyan.com. Yashwant Pankaj and team from Design String for building and managing my website. Apart from that, I would like to thank Veena Shahane, Manasi Joshi, Suneet Singh, Anirban Viswas, Prasad Phanse, Ramu Ramanathan, and all my friends and family for the support in helping me in connecting more people. So let's begin our today's episode, which is a recap of best GAN moments from 2017. First up is Anirudha Joshi, design professor from IDC, IIT Mumbai. He talks about state of design in India.
If you look at the scale of the country, 1.25 billion, 1.3 billion population country, our industry has been continuously growing for the last 20, 30 years at the rate of 7, 8, 10, 12, 14%. For a country of this size, in terms of population as well as industry, we need a large number. I would, if I have to take a guess, something like 10 million designers is something that we probably need. At least 5 million designers is something that we would be looking for. We are probably right now, in terms of numbers, somewhere around maybe 20,000 designers.
That's a massive
country. Okay, I don't know how you count a designer, but if you look at it, that's the huge gap basically that we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, we are not even 2% there, I would say. Okay, or 1% there. So we have a huge gap in terms of, and as a result, many things have happened actually. One of the things that has happened is that design has become inaccessible to people who need design.
Gangadharan Menon, a teacher and a writer. Ganga Sir talks about medium, message, and meanings of words.
In the English language, a person becomes old, you call him an old man or an old woman, and you send him or her to an old home because it is like an object. Because like a chair, like a computer, like a table, the man has become old. उसका utility खत्म हो गया, तो उसको old home में भेजो. लेकिन इंडिया में in Sanskrit or even in any Indian language, Malayalam, Marathi, Hindi, Vruddha is the word for old man or old person. Vruddha comes from the word Vruddhi, which is progress. He who has progressed in life. Not he who has become old. So this is a person who has progressed in life. This is a person who has seen much more than you. This is a person who has much more experience than you. So you will, like an antique, you will keep that person at home, na? You will not send that person to an old home. So we look after our grandparents, and our grandchildren will hopefully look after us because of that concept of sharing something which they will never be able to get on their own. They will take that many more years.
Dr. Vidyadhar Oak, who's a musicologist, and he speaks on fundamental differences between Hindustani and Carnatic classical music.
Look here, you rightly said that these are two different forms because basically it is Indian classical music. It is Bharatiya Shastriya Sangeet. You know, we call the different forms as Hindustani classical music or Carnatic classical music, and there are some reasons.
Okay.
Now see, originally our Indian classical music or Bharatiya Shastriya Sangeet has actually come from Samaveda. It is that old.
Oh, okay.
And ever since that time, people knew the swaras. For example, if you refer to the oldest manuscript probably, which is known as Dattilam.
Achha.
Dattilam, which comes between 100 and 200, 1st and 2nd century AD.
Oh,
thereafter we find Natya Shastra, written little after Dattilam, Natya Shastra by Bharata. Then Bharatamuni, you're right. Yeah. And then we come to right up to 8th or 9th century where we have Rishi Matanga who wrote Bruhaddeshi.
Narendra Ghate, chief designer at Tata Elxsi, shared his insight into industrial design and how are things manufactured and designed at a large scale.
So of course our process was to very traditional, do the user research, really understand how people use ponds. And quite a range of people, right, from men who dump it on their backs to women who put it as a deodorant. So there's a range of how ponds is used, how it is kept, understanding the different sizes that people like. Some want to carry it in their purse, while some want to have a large can in there. So there's an entire range of understanding what people expect, how the product is used. And the third, relatively unsaid but very important when it comes to industrial design, was how is this product currently manufactured. So now Unilever had more than 7 different product lines or factories across India, and all of them had sort of dated equipment. And ponds, and like the gentleman said, if every person in India is going to use your product, it has that kind of volume, which means this product is made at a rate of about 500 bottles per minute.
Wow. Varun Grover, a renowned lyricist and stand-up comedian, he shared his thoughts on creativity and its challenges.
Okay, so एक तो अच्छा 3 हिस्सों में ही लेते हैं इसको. एक तो ये कि I don't know if creativity or creative field thrives on limitations is the complete truth. क्योंकि बहुत तरह से क्रिएटिविटी दोनों तरह से होती है. इट्स ऑलवेज अ पुश एंड पुल थिंग कि कभी कभी होता है कि आपको फ्रीडम मिलता है इसलिए आप क्रिएटिव होते हो. कई बार होता है कि लिमिटेशन होती है इसलिए क्रिएटिव होते हो. और दोनों ही तरह से आई थिंक ग्रेट आर्टिस्ट बने हैं दुनिया भर में. बट स्टिल लिमिटेशन शायद उस तरह से अगर देखा जाए कि लिमिटेशन क्योंकि अंदर होती हैं, हमारे बाहर नहीं होती हैं, तो लिमिटेशन को तोड़ना ही एक तरह से क्रिएटिव प्रोसेस का पर्पस बन जाता है.
Uday Kumar, who has designed the rupee symbol of India, talks about the process of designing. So given the context of the rupee or the currency sign itself, is there any significance of vertical lines versus horizontal lines?
Yeah, I did study all the currency symbols as much as possible and try to understand their history and how it has actually evolved and what does it mean. So then I kind of learned that this dollar is actually came from the pesos, which they used to write like P and S. And over a period of time that they kind of become together, and only the vertical stroke of the letter P, capital letter P, had remained in the S, and then it became like the dollar symbol which is right now. Yeah, the S with a cross of a vertical line over that on top of it. So likewise, there are some symbols which have some kind of written literature on that. And then, so I try to look at it and try to figure out why this line is there. Then you kind of see that all the currency symbols around the world has this one commonality, which is like a line which cuts across them either vertically or horizontally. Yeah. So each one of them have their own significance, and I'm not aware of all of them. So at least from the dollar's point of view, I do know that it has evolved from the letter P and S, and they come together.
Rajat Kapoor, actor, writer, and director, shares his perspective on independent cinema.
To my understanding, independent cinema is something that is independent in its thought, and that is what I think really defines it. So I would say Christopher Nolan is an independent filmmaker. Oh. He makes films which are, I don't know, $100 million budget or more. But for me, he's or Coen brothers in the US, or Woody Allen, in spite of studio backing or not, I don't think that is eventually the mark of an independent film. But a film which tries to do something, how shall I say it? But a film that has the stamp of the director's vision on it. Okay. Which makes it a unique expression, which makes it like any other film ever made. Okay. And I think that is the beginning of independent thinking. I'm very attracted to what the Cahiers du Cinema people started in the late 50s and early 60s as the author theory, So they looked at Hitchcock and they looked at John Ford and Howard Hawks. And they said, even though these filmmakers are working with the studio system, with big stars, there is a thread linking all their films. There's an author there.
Okay.
And that became the author theory. There's a definite signature of the filmmaker.
Mahendra Patel, a professor from NID, speaks about typography and its basics.
Font on its own is seen as black and white. When we talk about emotion and expression, it is not only black and white. There is a color, there is a size, there is alignment, there is a use of capital lower cases, there is a spacing between letters, there is spacing between lines, there is many element tracking. So all those things you work out and you create intended impact or effect or expression of a typeface. For example, when you use sans serif and use a pink color from what you call feminine, soft or light gray color. If you sans serif and use bold and harsh, let's say steel blue color, gray blue color, then it becomes industrial. It doesn't become soft. So it depends on color also. If you use sans serif and use extra bold or a, let's say, modern type without bracketing, it becomes corporate font.
No, sir. Actually, I'm referring to the inherent font quality itself. I mean, if you compare a Helvetica or an Arial against each other in plain black and white itself, they evoke a different feeling. I mean, one feels like a good, and the other one is probably great. So, what is that difference? I mean, I'm not able to articulate, but you know what I mean, right?
Helvetica and newer typefaces, even though text to some extent, were designed in early time where there was no, it is a first font which is very much driven by construction, graphic construction on vertical and horizontal axis.
Pavitra Shri Prakash, an architect, deep dives into sustainability and ancient architecture.
Well, I think that this is a very, I think this is a fundamental question that will rock anybody who's practicing architecture in our country today. And I think that, there is so much to look back to and sort of celebrate our past and sort of learn from it, that it feels like the future is somewhat like you mentioned it mildly, bleak. but at the end of the day, I think what has happened with the building and sort of the entire real estate industry itself is that, forts and palaces used to be celebrations. They used to be extravagant, sort of, almost over the top buildings which used a whole lot of ornamentation, and there was a lot of attention to detail that went into trying to make a statement. Like every building back in the day, if you look at it, one palace was always trying to outdo the other palace. There was always a sense of, let's make it bigger, better, more grand. There was that constant, that sense of sort of almost cultural pride or I don't know, whatever else you'd want to call it, but that it used to be there. And nowadays, if you think about it, the entire movement of building has kind of evolved to sort of almost respect a certain different discipline, right? Because now we're tended toward minimalism. Like nobody wants to go in for so much ornamentation anymore or, do the kind of intricate work that we used to, because honestly, in today's culture, it seems too time consuming and too sort of tedious to sort of, have this level of, architectural detailing going into any building.
Suneet Singh, product designer, simplifies concepts like simplicity in design.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at simplicity in the context of products that we use, whether it's digital or physical, right? If I had to basically define what is really simple to use, I would, kind of start with saying that when someone is actually trying to use a product, that person, that user is, has an end goal in mind, right? The whole idea is to get something done.
Achieve a goal.
Exactly. When you're about to get something done and you're using a tool or a product, you expect it to behave in a certain way. And that expectation comes from whatever you're already familiar with. I think a designer's job to actually reach simplicity is to really understand what your user is already habitual to, is really about anticipating what would come naturally to a user, while using the product, right? In design, we like to use the phrase, let's build in as many affordances as possible. And I would define affordances as signals or indications that represent how something will behave.
Ramu Ramanathan's insightful talk on stage life heroes and villains was a revelation in itself.
So again, what happens is, to a large extent, our definition of these terms, antagonist, protagonist, tends to fall into certain formats of Hollywood and Bollywood. And because of certain entailments of commercial box office, etc., it sort of gets driven to a large extent by that. And in our view, I mean, in the world of literature, in the world of aesthetics, in the world of overall cultural experience, we find that is a very narrow perspective of generally reducing kathavastu, plot lines, to very, very sort of specific things. But if you go back, of course, you have the great Greek tragedies, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. But similarly, we had an extraordinary playwright who wrote in Sanskrit by the name of Bhas, and he's supposed to be a predecessor to even Kalidas. So this is 2nd century. And so, for example, there's a character he had developed called Duryodhan, which is in a play called Urubangam. And Urubangam is basically the chapter in which Duryodhan's thighs are smashed by Bhim. And then after that, what happens? So, Urubangam, okay? It's a very short piece. And it, in a way, defies all your perception about what a protagonist and an antagonist is. So, of course, we have what, Ved Vyas had written in the Mahabharata, plus public perception about what the Mahabharata is and who and what Duryodhan falls into that, right? He's evil, he's a villain, he's etc., etc.
Shiva Nella Perumal, a typeface designer, spoke about typefaces and gave some brilliant analogies.
So that's an interesting question, because this is where graphic design and type design greatly differ. And since I do both, it's like trying to find a nice balance between them. So graphic design, there's very less sense of authorship. What I mean is, if you're a musician and you make a song, you're the author of that song, right? You created it and that's what it's for. But graphic design does not have that much of authorship, in the sense, because a company would come to me and say, okay, we want you to design our logo, right? And I design the logo, but I don't have authorship over that logo. I would have never created that logo unless they came to me and asked. You know what I mean? So there is the impetus comes from somewhere else. So designers are always a service field. So we provide. We can't work without constraints. We can't work without a brief. But in type design, there is a level of authorship that we can have. For example, if, say, a company comes to me and says, again, let's use the same example. Newspaper comes to me and says, we want you to design a font for us. It has to be, very distinct, different from all other newspapers. And it has to be, we're going to use it in this size, So usually newspapers have that really small size that they use fonts in. So that is my constraint. So there are certain things that I need to do to make it readable at that size.
Atul Kulkarni, famous Bollywood actor known for his simplicity, expressed his ideas about acting and the process of becoming an actor.
It's a very cerebral process, according to me. Acting is an extremely cerebral process. And since I believe in it, I think staying detached is easy that way.
So if the actor keeps himself detached, what could be the process of developing the character or just staying in the character over a period of time, thereby probably showcasing the subtleties of the character, right?
I think acting is all about understanding the person that you are portraying and try to be that person, basically. And the process, I think, is different for different roles and different films. There is no blanket answer to it as to how one prepares. So, but broadly, if we look at it, it is definitely the script. The more and more you read the script and be with the script and think about it, you get to know the character more. Then, of course, you have your director with you, who guides you through, who tells you what, how he sees that character. And I think it is like what we say, giving time to your family. I think it is the same thing. You have to give time to your character, which basically means that from the moment you decide to do the film, it has to be at the back of your mind. Not that you have to be the character. There is difference. I'm absolutely not saying it. You have to be yourself all the time. However, you have to have that person, that character at the back of your mind. And the more time that you give to that person, naturally you get to know that person more. It is that simple logic which we follow even in our lives. And that is true even when you are acting.
Chetan Shedjale, lead designer at Harley Davidson, spoke on designing a motorcycle, which is quite a new concept for me and a new domain.
The basic idea of attaining a motorcycle for a certain market, like if you're designing a particular product for Europe or you're trying to do a product for global, there are two different aspects. So that comes to marketing research and your own research, and you talk through people. People tell us, but they really don't tell you whole idea, but they tell you some features like, oh, I like this way, or I like that way, or I want the comfort of this level, but I don't want it to be heavy. So these are design goals which come down and they get distilled in a form of like single words like agile, example, aggressive nature. People will be like, I want power. Power means it goes directly to the engine capacity. Is so example, if you're in India and people would say, like many of the times people might say, oh, there is a lot of heat, so that is directly to the solution of liquid cooling or oil cooled or whatever it is. So those are kind of like major milestones which we have to take in consideration.
Rush Bhatt, co-founder of Clear Trip, speaks about entrepreneurship, product and design.
So I guess in some ways it depends on the kind of company that you're starting and whether it's a service company or a product company. Is it a consumer facing company or is it a business facing company? And I'll try and answer this in a way that applies to both those types of companies. The very first thing is obviously the idea itself and the opportunity, which means, do you believe that you have something that your target market actually wants and is willing in some way, shape or form to pay you for providing?
Okay.
And within that itself, there's a lot of different things to consider, right? One, what, let's say you were starting something that's a consumer facing product company. One of the things to consider would be, this is all in terms of evaluating the overall opportunity. So one of the things to consider there would be, how much traction can this product get?
Okay.
And of course, that's how you evaluate the answer to that question is a matter of the margin that's built into your product.
Vikram Galot, teacher and a thinker, opened up my mind in the topics such as education and shared his views.
So at every point of change, whether it is fire or wheel or the entire history of human civilization is actually the history of technology. And that's what they're not teaching in history. They're teaching you Akbar and Babur in which date he is coming to Haldi Ghati. But why he's coming, what trend is this part of is what really good history teachers are supposed to do. And these are the people who definitely shape the future. And that is the job of education, to create aware people. But tell me one thing, Kedar, what are the things that you were rewarded in your school for? What kind of behavior were students praised for in your school?
I think getting
High
good
marks.
marks. Yeah, getting good
After
marks.
getting good marks?
Handwriting.
Handwriting, okay. Any other things people are praised for in your school?
I think if
in terms of behavior?
Yeah, behavior, and more likely to be more proactive or slightly come up with
leaders,
one-liners or like.
All right, humorous people, funny people, leaders.
Yeah.
And then there are there are other people also. Obedient children.
Yeah. And those were few of the best GAN sessions in 2017. Thanks for listening. For those who are tuning in for the first time, Audiogyan is a podcast that thrives to document thoughts and ideas from known and unknown gems of India who have done some remarkable and profound work in the field of design, arts, and philosophy. Stay tuned for more GAN on Audiogyan in 2018. Happy New Year!